You guys see me?
Yes, we can see you and we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this, I guess, third to last webinar in the 2020 Emergency Preparedness Network COVID-19 webinar series. And today we are going to talk about caring for the caregiver. And we're going to hear about that through the lens of a CNA named Ama Adepagren. She is been a CNA working in home care for many years, and we are really pleased to hear what she has to say. I'm Dr. Charlene Brown from CNA Simulations VR, working closely with Minka and EPN and the Maryland Office of Preparedness and Response to put this webinar series together. We wanted to take a moment and spotlight Jan Carisi, who is the Associate Director of the Emergency Preparedness Network. She is working behind the scenes, making sure that everybody is getting the email notifications about the webinars and the reminders about the webinars. And we wanted to spend a moment and just say thank you, Jan, for being you. Next to her is Don Seek, who's the Executive Director of Minka as well. And if you're wondering what Minka is, it's the Maryland National Capital Home Care Association. You can learn more about it at minka.org. It's the trade association for home care agencies of all types in Maryland and DC. This entire webinar series is brought to you by the Office of Preparedness and Response at the Maryland Department of Health, and we are grateful to them. If you'd like to join Minka, learn more about Minka, the website is there, or you can contact Dawn Seek at minka.org, mncha.org. If you're attending the webinar, you are on the mailing list for EPN, so you will continue to get notifications about upcoming webinars and other emergency preparedness issues that are of import to people working in home care. And of course, if you'd like to learn more about CNA simulations, you can go to my website at cnasimvr.com. There are 2 more webinars in the series. We've done 13, including today will be 13 webinars, and we have 2 more for a total of 15. Thank you for those of you who have stuck with us throughout the entire journey since the summer. And next Monday, you'll be able to hear from me at 4 p.m. I'll be talking about aerosols and COVID-19, what home care clinicians need to know. And on December 22nd, that's Tuesday, we have 2 more CNAs, Angel Jackson and Wendell Anderson, who have created a talk show called Let's Talk CNAs. They'll be coming and joining us and talking about how CNAs can protect their clients from COVID-19 outside the workplace. And I know that one of the topics they're going to talk about is the CNA perspective on vaccines. Let's introduce Ama again. So Ama is a Ghanaian immigrant who has been in home care for many years. I met her back in 2016 when she was not only working full-time as a CNA, but she was also going to school at Montgomery College and seemed to be juggling quite a number of things. And so that energy and that ability to manage many things is why she's been such an outstanding CNA in home care, but also why she graduated from Montgomery College and is now an undergraduate student at University of Maryland. She is studying accounting. So as a senior caregiver specialist for caregiver jobs now, Ama actually spent years talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of CNAs, home health aides, personal care aides, and more about their careers. And even in preparation for today's webinar, she actually conducted even more interviews to understand how caregiving professionals are coping with the pandemic and to inform her talk about caring for the caregiver. So I'm excited to introduce Ama, but before we switch over to Ama, we're going to have a poll that Ama has asked us to run. So Nasan, take it away. All right, just go ahead, and there are 3 questions. If you take a few moments to answer them, we'll wait, and then we'll see what the results are. All right, Nasan, why don't we see what the results are of the poll? Interesting. So, how often do you feel any of these emotions since the pandemic, fear, anxiety, or anger? The majority of people have felt it sometimes or often. The majority of you feel like you have the necessary skills to deal with those feelings. And the majority of you think your employer has done enough to support you during the pandemic. All right, wonderful. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amma.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Charlene. Thank you, Nasan. And also, I want to say a very big thank you to the Maryland Emergency Preparedness Network for having me to, talk about caregivers. Any talk about caregivers is exciting to me, so I'm very grateful. I also want to say a very big thank you to our audience for today. It's a cold day outside, and you've all taken time to to listen to me. So I'm very grateful. It is no doubt that this year has been a challenging one for everybody, but especially for those of us who find ourselves in the healthcare industry. Many of us have had to pull out some skills that we haven't used in a while. And in addition to that, we've also had to make a lot of sacrifices, just to keep the system working. When I speak with caregivers, there are four key words that stand out to me in our conversation, and they are fear, anger, disappointment, and anxiety. And I feel like whether you work in healthcare or not, these, emotions resonate with, each and every one this year. For us caregivers, we are afraid because we have such a close, relationship with our clients that we feel we can, have ourselves exposed to the COVID virus, or and transfer it to our clients, or we can even pick it up from our clients. um, Other caregivers are in anger because our plans have been distorted. Many of us had so many plans that we wanted to execute this year, but due to the pandemic, we haven't been able to. At the beginning of this, world-changing event, a lot of caregivers were very disappointed. And it was due to the fact that when healthcare heroes were mentioned, the support staff like we, the nursing assistants, the home health aides, and even the PCAs, we were not included on that list. So many of us feel a sense of disappointment. And then anxiety. Because majority of the clients that we work for are aged, a lot of their family members do not feel comfortable having us come into their homes, and we are anxious about where our next job is going to come from, how we are even going to keep up with the bills that we have, in addition to a lot of caregivers having to stay at home with their children and helping them through school. All these emotions put together, puts us caregivers in despair. But the truth of the matter is, COVID 19 is going to be with us, for a very long time. But I think I'm grateful that, there is this vaccine that, is going to hopefully help all of us. But it's going to be here for a while. And as such, we need to develop setting skills and, create certain awareness for ourselves to keep us sane and also to keep us going and help the system to work. And this is what my presentation today is going to be about from the caregiver's perspective. The first part of the presentation is going to focus on me talking to my fellow caregivers about some of the things that they can do to care for themselves during this time. And then from there, I will switch over to speak with the employers based upon the research that I have done in my conversation with caregivers, just speaking to employers to inform them about how they can support caregivers during this time. So to start with, I would like to share a picture of my parents, and Charlene will share it very quickly. This is a picture of my mother and my father. In 2005, my father had his very first stroke, and this was in Ghana. As soon as my father got sick, my mother, in addition to my siblings and I, became my father's primary caregivers. But a lot of the burden fell on my mother because we had to go to school and she didn't have to work. So she had to stay at home and take care of my father. In 2015, my father had another major stroke, which led to him losing his mobility and also his speech. When my father was discharged and he came home, one of the first things my sister who lives in London did at the time was to remove my mother from Ghana so that she could spend some time in London. And at the time, none of us siblings understood what the intention of my sister was. We felt like my mother had to be with my father so that she could take care of him and help him get better. But my sister, who is an intensive care nurse, she understood why it was important for her to remove my mother from having to go through so much with my dad. And that brings me to my first point. As caregivers, we need to learn to take breaks. Caregiving is a calling. If you are not called to be a caregiver, you would not succeed at it, which is very similar to other careers. But caregiving is a very emotional job. I was reading an article very recently which talked about how spouses or individuals who care for a sick person end up falling sick themselves or even passing away. And this is due to the difficulty of the difficulty of the job, and also the emotional aspects of it, having to worry about someone. I know some caregivers who have had to work double shifts all 7 days of the week during this pandemic because most places are understaffed. So caregivers have had to work more, but prioritizing rest is very, very important. I read a post that said, if you don't prioritize your body to take rest, your body will take one for you. And it will be on a day that you do not want, which often is the case. I've been a victim of it. Being a caregiver, juggling work, juggling school, I've fallen sick at times when I was like, no, my body cannot do this to me. My body said, yes, this is the time for you to rest. You didn't listen, so you're going to get it. And it wasn't something that I appreciated at all. And I have come to appreciate the importance of rest. Scientists also add to this knowledge by, advising that when we have rest, we are not just, we are not just resting to go back to our normal lives to do the things that we want to do, but it affects even our cognitive ability, in our thinking, in our as caregivers, when you are caregivers who have to pass medication so that you don't make mistakes. When you are tired, you are not a very pleasant person to be around. All these things go to add to the fact that rest is very important. And even though so much is demanded of us as caregivers during this time, we need to make rest a priority. And someone might ask, how do I prioritize break? My job needs me. I need to be there. Well, we can start by sleeping. Some of us need more sleep than others. And as a caregiver who worked nights for 3 years, I can tell you how that distorts your not having enough sleep can distort your body's function and processes. You do not eat well, and because you're not eating well, your body is you are not as happy as you want to be. Your thinking capacity is all over the place. It's all over the place. Doctors recommend between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And for most caregivers, I don't really have the average number, but I know that at one point I was telling people that, oh, I'm fine on 4 hours of sleep. And I know that is not true, but I had, trained myself to accept the fact that 4 or 5 hours of sleep was enough for me. Now that I have a greater understanding on the importance of sleep, excuse me, and I've been able to put aside so many of the things that were taking a lot of my time. I appreciate how my body is functioning. I feel like I'm a more pleasant person, and I smile more now because I'm always in a good mood. So it is very important for us as caregivers to put ourselves first and prioritize rest. One of the things that I also want to say is a lot of caregivers, I mean, immigrant caregivers that I have come in contact with will tell you, I will sleep when I'm dead. Well, guess what? There are some caregivers who have actually, prophesied this for themselves. I personally work with a caregiver who passed away due to the fact that she wasn't having enough rest. She was jumping from one bus to the other, working the whole time. And one day on the J2 bus going to work in Bethesda, she suffered a heart attack. So rest is so important that, and I'm going to talk to the employers about it a little bit when I go to the employer side. Rest is so important, and it is actually not overrated. Not overrated. Another way that we can also prioritize breaks is learning how to say no. My aunt is a 70-year-old caregiver who retired 5 years ago. But because she doesn't want to just be at home and not have a whole lot to do, she still takes cases here and there, short hours, and sometimes long hours. But even with her, 95% of the email that she receives and the text messages that she receives are from employers who want her to work. And sometimes she would tell me, oh, if I were still to be a spring chicken, I would take this case and I would take that case. And she tells me this all the time. But one thing that my aunt has also instilled in me as a caregiver, my aunt actually encouraged me to become a caregiver. One of the values that she has instilled in me is to learn how to say no. She says a lot of caregivers do not know how to say no because our work is seasonal. Like right now, caregivers are being called from here and there. But there are also times when the caregiving cases do not come as often. So you find a caregiver working 24 hours a day because they are afraid that when there is a shortage of caregiving jobs, they would at least have a little bit of money saved so that they can take care of themselves. But honestly, my aunt always tells me that did not help me. I developed high blood pressure because I was always in a hurry trying to get to the next job. I developed diabetes. I was not eating well. I gained so much weight, all because I didn't learn how to say no. And it's not just her. My aunt has a network of about 13 women who are all caregivers that she speaks to. And all of them also resonate the same, echo the same thing to me. So as caregivers, we need to know our limits and know when to say no. Employers will call you, often to go work for them because a case just came, which is wonderful news. But we need to know our limit to know when to say yes and when to say no. Because guess what? When you cannot take care of yourself and you fall sick, you become of no use to a caregiver. And this statement that I'm repeating is a statement that an employer actually repeated to me. She said this was in 2013. An employer said to me, Amma, go home and take care of yourself because guess what? Right now, you are of no use to me. And unless you can take care of yourself, I am not going to allow you to be here. There are I've worked with some agencies that will not allow their caregivers to work more than 8 hours and 12 hours maximum. As soon as you hit that the set number, that's 60 hours, they will not allow you to work anymore, which is wonderful because if you leave us caregivers, we just want to work. So we're going to keep working. Um, Another way that caregivers can also take care of themselves during this time is to practice self compassion. As caregivers, we have been trained to be so empathetic and to have compassion for everyone around us except ourselves. You know, we have so much feeling for our clients and all of that. But when it comes to projecting that same self compassion on ourselves, we are at a miss. We don't even know how to practice it. And I learned how to practice self compassion from a Yale University professor named Laura Santos, who teaches a course on actually the science of happiness. And she was talking about practicing self compassion. And when we practice self compassion, we put ourselves in perspective and we become self aware. So the same way that we speak to our client when our client is having a bad day, we encourage them. We need to do the same for ourselves. And trust me, it is really hard. It's easy for you to go to someone, pat them on the back, give them a hug, and tell them that I wish you well, may you be this, may you be that. But when it comes to projecting that same kind of energy on ourselves, we are at a miss, and we don't know how to do it. So according to Dr. Laura Santos, to practice self-compassion, you can do it at any time, but the very simple way of doing it is to encourage yourself and say things like, I wish you well today. May you be blessed. May you feel love. May you, whatever you want to say. So for me, example, I say things like, may you excel in your classes. May you be kind to your clients. And as I'm saying that, you know, um, it kind of like it relaxes me and it keeps me calm and it energizes me to do more because I feel like it's telling me that I'm worth more. And I can, when I feel like I'm worth more, I can also do more for others. Another way that I'm also taking care of myself during, this pandemic time is practicing gratitude, right? So um, when you practice gratitude, you don't leave any space in your mind to think about the things that are going wrong. There are caregiver. I spoke with a caregiver the other day who was telling me about how, you know, all the clients on the floor that she was working at, the clients were passing away one room to the other. It was like they had lined them up, and there was a roster which was deciding who was to go next. And she felt so bad about, this situation that she ended up quitting her job. And it was just terrible. And how can this caregiver was telling me, because of that, she was so worried, she was so scared, she didn't work for between May and September, she didn't work at all. And she was so broken. So for this caregiver, for an example, I encourage her, just be grateful. What are some of the things in your life that have gone right? How can you be grateful for these things? And when we, like I already said, when we practice the art of gratitude, we don't leave any room in our mind to think about the things that have gone wrong, the things that didn't happen for us, all the negative things that are happening in the world, because we are grateful for our family, and we are grateful for the provision that has been made, and we are grateful for having a wonderful network like this to talk about the needs of caregivers. That is the first part for caregivers. And that brings me to the part that I want to speak to employers. So during this time, like I already said, caregivers have had to really show out, and they've had to really put their best foot forward. And even though employers have also done well, there are some caregivers who feel like employers should have have done more. Some employers have provided food. Some employers have provided training for caregivers to know how to handle this COVID situation. Others have provided PPE for their caregivers. But there was one caregiver who was telling me that I wish my employer had provided more COVID tests because I was so worried that at any point in time, I might have the COVID virus. So I wish that my employer would have provided more COVID tests. And that is one thing. The caregiver who told me that majority of the clients on her floor passed away was also telling me that I wish that my employer had helped me to find a better way to deal with, the increased number of deaths that I observed. So this caregiver, in other sense, was telling me that she wished she had had, some sort of, therapy session to discuss how she was feeling, and to even learn some skills to deal with the way that she had been feeling. So these are some of the things that I want to discuss with employers today. I feel like at my school, for an example, 3 times a week we had mental health sessions where some sessions we were doing exercises like Zumba. For other sessions, people were doing yoga. For one session that I really enjoyed, we were performing meditation. And through meditation, I learned how to control my breathing and calm myself down so that I'm not so anxious all the time. Um, I was so worried because when the pandemic first started, I was working in a facility that didn't really come out to, tell us what was going on. I heard that we had COVID cases in this facility through other people, through other caregivers, but because I wasn't very sure about whether the source was telling the truth or not, I was in so much, anxiety the whole time, and it wasn't healthy for me. So, for the employers, I feel like caregivers want to have more sessions where they can learn how to even meditate, how to keep calm during situations that make them feel very anxious. um, Caregivers also want to have a safe space where they can come to and talk about, how they are really feeling, and it's like if you ask me like, Amma, how are you doing today, my automatic response will be, oh, I'm good. But when you ask me, how do you really feel, how do you feel about this particular situation, how is your relationship with your clients going in terms of the pandemic, then you are opening up the door to several conversations that can be, several, not just several conversations, but several deep conversations that can be, talked about so that the caregiver's perspective or point of view can really, really come out. Caregivers also want to feel like they also want to feel motivated. So I asked one of the caregivers, how do you feel your employer can motivate you? And they said, I would like to have like a motivational message, something that tells me that there is somebody out there, thinking about me. And with caregivers, it's easy for us to, we give so much of ourselves, and we have such close relationships with our clients. But even though we have made a covenant to care for our clients, I feel like caregivers are also owed a covenant too, and someone must take, our well-being into account, because sometimes we feel ashamed and we feel resentful to come out and say this is what we actually need from our employer, and we feel like, oh, if we've been put in this situation where we have to take care of somebody, then we cannot have any weaknesses at all. But that is not the case. Caregivers, we need care too. And as I've already talked about, um, we can also have, videos like weekly videos or even monthly videos that talk about how to even control stress. What is stress? Some caregivers don't even know when they are stressed. They don't even know how to identify that, oh, me being irritable or me not having enough sleep or me eating too much might even be because I'm stressed. We don't know how to identify it. And we don't understand how, even though we don't understand how stress is affecting our body. And that is why a lot of caregivers go to work and we are snappy to our clients and we are not doing the work the way that we want to do, even as we have been called to do this. So these are the thoughts that I picked up from caregivers. I do hope that the tips that I have shared resonates with a lot of caregivers, and I'm open to answering your questions, and any feedback that you have for me will be very much appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Amma. I love the call to action, and the way you spoke from the heart was really powerful. So thank you for sharing your insights with us as a CNA and caregiver. Let's open up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions or comments for Amma, just go ahead and put the questions in the Q&A. It's at the bottom of your Zoom screen towards the right. And we have Yvette Housen, who says, thank you, Amma. Oh, sweet.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's wait a minute and see if we have any questions. I know that look at that. Hi.
Hi,
Lillian
Lily.
Rivera. Is that someone you know?
No.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Well, hi. Thank you for commenting. Do you have a question for Amma? Yes. Okay. Let's hear it. So while we're waiting for Lillian, Denise says, thank you so much, but how do you take care of stress?
So I know Denise, and Denise, thank you very much for your question. So I think before we can deal with stress, that is if you know the signs of stress already, but every individual is different. For me, I know I'm stressed when I'm very, first off, it starts off like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't have any interest in doing anything. And then I'm very short-tempered and I'm not as pleasant to be around, right? So when I start having these moments, which is not usual for me, then I know something is not going on, right? So I start to think, what are the things that are going on in my life? Do I have too much homework? Have I met this deadline? Or is there a deadline even coming up? So I start thinking about all the things that I should be doing. And to take care of stress, there are so many ways. You can start by meditating. I say meditation because I feel like it's very fast. You don't have to go to the gym and work on some exercise, right? When you can meditate for a minute by doing deep breathing. So one of the things I learned about deep breathing is it helps you to open up your lungs, and it helps to calm you down. And by doing that, some people have even been able to reduce their blood pressure because of deep breathing. I have a smartwatch that reminds me every hour to do deep breathing. So you can also set a timer for yourself to do this, breathing exercises. Yoga, you can also do yoga. Yoga is one of the things that really helps to calm you down. If you really want to feel centered, you can try to do yoga. Some people also do Tai Chi. They feel like, the slow movements of the Tai Chi helps them to combat stress. But one of the things that you can also do is talking about your feelings. As I was doing my research for this presentation, I came across a helpline that is mainly for individuals in healthcare. You can call this line, that is if you don't have someone to talk to. You can call this helpline and talk to a live person who will just listen. If you don't want them to talk, they're not going to say anything. They will just listen to you, and it's a safe space to vent. It's completely anonymous. They don't have your number, and you don't have to share any details about yourself. They don't even encourage you to share details about yourself. And if anyone is interested, I'm very happy to provide this number for them so that you can call and share your feelings. And also, if you want, any professional help, they are willing to connect you to therapists who will be able to provide you with professional help. So for me, I know I'm stressed when I'm, very irritable, or I'm eating a lot. I'm eating a lot. So that's also another sign that you can look out for. Or even when I'm gaining weight, but obviously that comes from the eating. So yeah. That is how I know.
Thank you, Alma. That was a great response. We have a question now from Yvette, who says, Alma, what is the best way to have caregivers attend sessions on relieving stress and taking care of oneself? I'm an agency owner, and I've made this a priority within my organization to aid my caregivers with the external pressures that they have to deal with, but I need their participation. So what can Yvette do?
Yes, so I understand where you're coming from, Yvette. When I worked with the agency, we used to have monthly exercises, and the only way they could get me to bring back the monthly exercises was, the only way they could get me to do these exercises was if I had to take a test, right? Or if I had to bring anything in. So I would say maybe instead of having caregivers jump onto a Zoom call, if you're dealing with my aunt who's 70-year-old and who does not know how to use Zoom, it's not going to go very well. But maybe short clips of recordings of meditation sessions, of yoga, of exercises that can be emailed or texted, and then caregivers need to respond with one or two things that they learned from whatever video that you shared with them. I think that would help. Yeah.
That's a great suggestion. We also have Mel says, yes, meditation, deep breathing are all helpful. We agree. We will ask Alma for the number, and we'll send it out to everyone who registered for the webinar. So you'll be able to get that. Donham says, oh, this is great. Donham is on the call with 10 of their organization's CNAs or caregivers, and they say, great message, Alma. So that's
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, Donna.
An anonymous attendee says, how often do you think a caregiver should be tested for COVID-19?
So personally for me, I don't get tested by my employer. I get tested at my school. And although I'm not on campus, testing is free on campus. I get tested every week. You never know. And because I'm working in the home of clients, I'm protecting myself. But I recommend that if it's free, you don't have to pay. Your employer doesn't expect you to pay for it. I think getting tested every week or every other week, depending, I would say every week to start with, but depending on the caregiver and how they feel about, getting tested, maybe every other week will be useful also.
Okay. Listen to Lillian asks, have you thought about becoming a registered nurse since you've been a CNA for a long time?
Yes, the thought has crossed my mind, and my sister is one of the people who is always encouraging me to, who actually in the beginning, when I started taking community college classes, wanted me to become a nurse. But for some reason, I enjoy, caregiving. And when I've worked in hospitals, I've not really felt that connection, to becoming a nurse. So I don't know, maybe it's in my future, but I'm not sure.
Wonderful. So David asks, I know caregivers need the money, but please take, David is commenting. He knows that caregivers need money, but please take care of yourself, take a vacation, take a walk, do fun stuff for yourself. I concur, absolutely. Let's see, we have, how can we get, so Osmolis says, thank you, Alma, for the information. I thank you, Alma. Pam would like to know, how can we get caregivers to admit to emotional stress?
Yeah. Also, caregivers will not give you the full information, but I think it's, having, like I mentioned, deeper conversation. If you ask me, how are you doing, Amma? I'm going to tell you I'm fine because that is the automatic response. But having intentional conversation, hey, Pam, let's have a meeting 8 a.m. on Monday. We are going to talk about your well-being with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. How does this job make you feel? um, have you noticed any differences in how you relate to others? I feel like there are certain questions that when we are asking, and maybe we also need to bring professionals in who know how to really probe and ask these questions to actually bring the answer out. So yeah, I think that would be the best thing to do, because if we're talking friend as friend, I'll tell you I'm okay, unless I'm comfortable around you, or unless I feel like whatever conversation that I'm actually talking to you about, I'm going to have some kind of feedback that will be beneficial to me. So maybe having a professional who really knows how to dig deep will be good. Yeah.
That was a great response. Pam says, great webinar. Self-care is not optional. We agree. We have a question for me. Dr. Charlene, do you know places where caregivers can be tested with expedience? Several of the testing centers have long wait times. Yes, it's especially now as the rates are going up and more people are going for testing, it can be really hard to find places where you can get tested quickly. The only way I know of that where you can get tested with expedience is actually quite expensive. There are more and more companies that are offering at-home collection test kits, so you can actually do your own sample, take a nasal swab, ship it out to a testing company, and then they can deliver results. That is, but that costs money, and sometimes it's covered by insurance, but it's not the same as the free testing sites that you'll find around DC and Maryland. And so I don't actually know of any places that don't have the long wait times, unfortunately. Mel has another question. Do you think having a life coach come in can help with that? What do you think, Alma?
I do agree. I don't have a life coach, but I do have two mentors, and I feel like that has helped me so much, not just in my education, but also in my personal life. I have a mentor who helps me, with my academics and also my career path. But then I also do have a mentor who does nothing with my education and just talks to me about my life path. Just talk about my life and just sort of like give me guidance about how to do certain things. So yeah, and I've benefited a lot from that. So I think yes, it will be beneficial. Yeah.
Okay, great feedback for Mel. Um, Here's another comment. I appreciate both of you for sharing these all important things with us. I enjoy being part of the webinar and would like the number for therapy assistance. So yes, we'll definitely
I'm excited.
get this number. I think you're having a real impact on the people who've attended. Um, I have a question. I have a question for you, actually. So, through the lens of, as a CNA who's worked for multiple different agencies over the years and who's worked across different settings, what do you think? How do you think CNAs and caregivers can support one another in terms of self care?
um, I think holding each other accountable,
Mm-hmm.
like yes, I think holding each other accountable. So um in facilities, for an example, that is where when you work in home care, it's a whole different ballgame. But when you work in facilities, that is the time where we can prioritize having like an accountability partner, right? Who would ask you things like, hey, have you done your meditation today? How many minutes of meditation did you do today? Or have you had your monthly check-in to discuss how you are feeling about the two clients who passed away on our floor today, like things like that. I feel that would help. And also for caregivers who work in home care, I don't really know of, a caregiver support group. During this time, there used to be one at the Montgomery Mall in Potomac, but maybe this is an opportunity for us to start a WhatsApp group where caregivers can come in and, support each other over there and share things that they have done during this time that has helped or, not helped. Yeah.
Is that something you're going to do? Start that WhatsApp group?
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, I also want to mention this before I forget. I know a lot of caregivers have been impacted financially during this time. A lot of food banks are empty, but the food bank at my church, thanks to God, is giving out free food every other Saturday. So if you're a caregiver worried about where the next meal is coming from, we're having our next donation on the 23rd of December. I'm personally going to be there distributing food. So please join us this will be of benefit to you. Yeah.
Why don't nobody knows what your church is. And so what we can do is we can send that out in the information as well with for people who registered.
Yes. Awesome.
Wonderful. That sounds great. I wonder, you talked about the WhatsApp group and ways that caregiving professionals can support one another. Do you think agencies can build systems that enable their caregivers in their employ to support one another? Or do you think that's something caregivers really need to spearhead for themselves?
I think there's no one way to do it separately. I feel like having one for an agency would be good, but caregivers want to have their own conversations on their own. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, instead of me and Alma just sitting up here chatting, let's see, does anyone have any other questions before we wrap up? Comments, thoughts, feedback, challenges? Does anyone disagree with something that Alma said?
yeah. And something that I can learn also that I didn't mention.
Let's see. This information has been exceptionally helpful, not only to the CNAs, but to those of us who work behind the scenes with the agencies as staff. Thank you, Dr. Brown and to Alma for sharing, for those of us who work behind the scenes. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Oh, look, we have Yvette agrees. They need to be able to fuss about the boss in private. Good points. Okay, so we have quite a few thank yous. Personally, I want to thank you, Alma. I want to thank you for being you. Literally, you are one of the most remarkable people I've met in my lifetime. And I'm really, really happy that you came back to do another webinar and to really speak truth, to really be transparent and clear and directive to the caregivers and to the agencies who were able to join the call, and those will be able to see the recording of this webinar. We have a resounding compliments from the galley, and Danam also concurs as someone who works behind the scenes that this has been really valuable. Thank you, Amma. You know your stuff. I agree. Amma knows her stuff. And that's actually a really great note oh wait, there's one more. Thank you. Lots of thank yous, and I thank you. And so before we wrap up, I'm actually going to just take a moment and do a final thank you to all of the wonderful sponsors of this event. And so we have the Maryland Office of Preparedness and Response. It's part of the Maryland Department of Health. We have MINCA. We have the Maryland Emergency Preparedness Network, and we have us. And so thank you everyone who attended. Alma, thank you for your leadership as a CNA in Maryland and as an individual who just finds ways to contribute and give back in society. And thank you to all of the attendees who came, who joined, and who asked such great questions and provided such great comments. We are thrilled that you were able to participate. And with that, we're going to close out. Have a wonderful holiday. But don't forget to join us. Wait. Don't forget, I'm going to do my final plug. Don't forget to join us. You can actually still register for the Monday webinar, Aerosols and COVID, what home care clinicians need to know. You can see me at 4 p.m. Or you can join us on December 22nd at 7 p.m. and hear the Let's Talk CNAs crew talk about how CNAs can help keep their clients safe when they're not at home. And in all of that, another question came up. So consider that the wrap up. But Lillian wants to know if you know of any agencies that have free CNA classes. I think you've inspired a new CNA. Lillian is exploring. Um, Interesting. Well, the Caroline Center in Baltimore does offer free CNA classes. They have an application process. And I know the community colleges in Maryland, multiple community colleges have received um, funding recently to support paying tuition for people who want to become CNAs. And so I recommend reaching out to your local community college and just calling and asking and finding your way to the people that can tell you whether or not they have funding. And of course, Google the Caroline Center in Baltimore, and you can learn more there about what the cycle is for their application process to be considered there. But Lillian, we would love it if you became a CNA. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to close out. Bye.
Bye bye. Happy holidays.